stand strongly against the Hahn Amendment. It's dangerous for our national security. It's dangerous for the American people, and I ask the body to reject it this evening. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California. Those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California raise?
We have a recorded vote on that. The two ladies.
All right. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California will be postponed. Gentleman from New York. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York raise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Higgins of New York. Page 37, line 18, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $58 million. Page 55, line 2, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $58 million. Page 55, line 4, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $58 million.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, my amendment, which is co-sponsored by Representative Stivers, is a bipartisan effort to provide essential public safety funding to communities across the country that have been determined to be at high risk of a terrorist threat. This amendment would provide for an additional $58 million to state and local grant programs that the Secretary of Homeland Security should use to increase eligibility for urban areas security initiatives to all communities at high risk, including Buffalo, which I represent. The intent is to restore the eligibility of these communities to again participate in the WASI program after being unfortunately cut out in the past. The Buffalo-Niagara region, which was made ineligible without merit. The area includes 4 international bridge crossings and the busiest passenger crossing along the Niagara border with Canada, the largest electricity producer in New York State, and the area that was home to the al-Qaeda terrorist cell in Lackawanna 6. It sits along 2 Great Lakes, which contain the largest freshwater supply in the world, and is within a 500-mile radius of 55% of the American population and 62% of the Canadian population. Buffalo is not alone either. Border communities like El Paso, San Antonio, and Austin were cut as well. Cities in close proximity to large ports, refineries, and utilities like Columbus, New Orleans, Memphis, Nashville, and Oklahoma City were cut as well. 36 communities in total were cut from all across the country. Now, as we are only beginning to realize the threats posed by these places, is it penny-wise and pound-foolish to leave them without the resources to maintain the capacity gains they developed throughout this program? Mr. Chairman, the 9/11 Commission made it clear that protecting the homeland from terrorist threats can and should be a federal priority. Yet the Department has hedged on this commitment by excluding too many vulnerable communities that need to participate in this Department of Homeland Security program. We know that the threats to these areas are real, and we should be doing everything possible to provide law enforcement with the tools to prevent and to respond to them. Again, Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan amendment because the terrorist threat to these communities is real and is dynamic. And we should be doing everything that we can to empower these communities to prevent themselves from these threats. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would strongly urge my colleagues to support fiscal discipline as well as critical research and development. Therefore, with the concerns we have about the gentleman's amendment, we ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Gentleman yields back.
Yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose the gentleman from North Carolina?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, here we have another amendment dealing with FEMA grants, and once again we we come to appreciate the need for more robust support for urban area grants, for state and local grants, for transit and port grants, rail grants, the kind of protective efforts that our communities require. We're reminded again that those grants have been cut very drastically in recent years, and in this bill we're only beginning to bring them back to the levels required. So I want to commend our colleague for this amendment, which proposes $58 million, I believe, in increased funding for these grants. This is money that could be well spent, wisely spent, prudently spent by our states and local communities. Again, I simply call attention to the problems posed by the offset. Members will have to make their own judgments about this. The money is taken out of the Science and Technology Directorate at the Department of Homeland Security, taken out of the labs accounts, as I understand it, which does include the NBAF item discussed earlier, but isn't limited to NBAF. I just remind colleagues that science and technology research activities have been cut 60% over the last 2 years. And so there's an increase in this bill. We've fought our way back in this area, too, in this bill, restoring some of these cuts against a baseline that was way too low. And so these science and technology, this is not free money. This is related just as surely as anything in the bill to this country's security, and it's underinvested in at the moment. And so we do have to weigh competing values here, and certainly in the balance we deserve to, the science and technology priorities deserve serious consideration. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question then is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Speaker, I ask for a quarter vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York will be postponed. Read.
Page 41, line 19, firefighter assistance grants, $670 million to remain available until September 30th, 2014, of which
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Now. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the remainder of the bill through page 54, line 19, be considered as read, printed in the record, and open to amendment at any point.
Is there any objection? None, so ordered. Are there any amendments to that portion? For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk, suspend if you would. Clerk has to read first.
Page 54, line 20, research, development, acquisition, and operations, $695,971,000, of which $493,539,000 shall remain available until September 30th, 2015.
Now, for what purpose the gentleman from New York rise?
Amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Bishop of New York. Page 55, line 3, after the dollar amount, insert increase by $75 million. Page 55, line 4, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $75 million.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is simple. It reduces by $75 million the amount the DHS can spend on construction of laboratory facilities, specifically the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, or NBAF, planned for Manhattan, Kansas, and returns those funds to the Research, Development, Acquisition, and Operations account. This unnecessary government spending is little more than an attempt to earmark funds for a project that the Obama administration zeroed out in its FY13 budget proposal, that the DHS acknowledges will cost over $1 billion to construct, that the National Academy of Sciences has raised real concerns about the possibility of foot and mouth disease release, and that many in the agricultural community are asking, why take the chance? When the National Academy of Sciences last reviewed the NBAF proposal, they indicated that the risk of foot and mouth disease in the nation's heartland was a 70% risk over a 50-year period. The Academy also estimated the cost of a potential release of foot-and-mouth disease at $9 billion to $50 billion. While it is correct that earlier this year DHS indicated this risk had been mitigated with additional design features, the National Academy of Sciences is still reviewing the revised risk assessment. Common sense requires that until the revised risk assessment is complete, we should not be entertaining the idea of appropriating precious taxpayer dollars for construction of this project. NBAF has also become a financial boondoggle. The estimated cost of construction has skyrocketed from an original estimate of $451 million only a few years ago to well over $1 billion today. At this time, it is a colossal risk to the American taxpayer to advance a project the cost of which has doubled in less than 5 years, and when funding from fiscal years 2011 and 2012 remain unobligated. At a time when my Republican colleagues continually argue that our nation's debt is out of control and the deficit must be reined in, it is both hypocritical and unwise to spend taxpayer dollars that the President has not requested for a project that is still under design review to be placed in a region that is acutely sensitive to the horrible diseases that will be studied at the facility. The only logical, responsible thing to do while the many questions surrounding NBAF remain unanswered is to wait to invest taxpayers' hard-earned money and continue to utilize existing DHS assets to study the various animal diseases that face our agricultural community. Mr. Chairman, funding for the construction of NBAF is tantamount to a $75 million earmark for the Kansas delegation. Funds were not included in the President's budget, and the project has yet to spend the money that has already been appropriated. DHS has other important research and more pressing construction projects than NBAF. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Alabama rise.
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman. Rise to oppose the amendment. Concerns that we had noted earlier about the importance of the NBAF program that the administration has stressed, and also the need that was stressed in our hearings earlier in the spring. This time I'd like to recognize and yield to the lady from Kansas to speak on this amendment as well.
Gentlelady from Kansas, recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. The first priority of the federal government is to protect the American people, and the National Bio and Agri-Defense Facility has been declared necessary to provide that protection. The Department of Homeland Security under both the Bush and Obama administrations and the House Appropriations Committee under both Democrat and Republican leadership have made it quite clear time and time again that our country needs the NBAF, and the best place to do that research is in Manhattan, Kansas. Congress has already appropriated $90 million, and the state of Kansas and the city of Manhattan have already committed more than $200 million towards the project. For the record, the calculations performed in this updated SSRA that was previously mentioned indicate that the estimated probability that an accident happened at this facility was less than 11%. While, again, this proposal might be nice if we had a surplus, the result of this amendment will be stopping or delaying construction of this vital NBAF facility, jeopardizing our security and our nation's food supply. I urge the body reject this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Alabama still controls the time.
I yield back.
He yields back. Gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of the amendment offered by my friend from New York, Mr. Bishop, an amendment that will increase funding for research and development activities within the Science and Technology Directorate by $75 million. And it will dictate that no new appropriated funds will be available in fiscal year 2013 for the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, NBAF. I stress no new funds. The administration did not request funds for NBAF in 2013, and I simply cannot support inclusion of the $75 million contained in this bill until 2 National Academy of Science reviews are completed on the security of this new facility to prevent the accidental release of foot-and-mouth virus or other harmful pathogens. Members may recall that the GAO, the National Academy of Sciences, and Congress itself have had long-standing concerns about the decision to relocate the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility to the mainland unless we have a comprehensive and validated strategy to prevent the release of foot and mouth virus and other harmful pathogens into the community. In 2011, the National Academy of Sciences found that, based on preliminary designs of the facility, there would be a 70% risk of a release of foot and mouth disease leading to infection outside the laboratory. The economic cost was estimated to be between $9 and $50 billion over the next 50 years, as the lifespan of NBAF would be projected. DHS has redone its site security risk assessment now that the NBAF design is further along, adding additional protective measures suggested by the original National Academy study. As required by statute, the National Academy is reviewing the site security risks again to take into account these new mitigation strategies. Now, even if we assume that the National Academy gives a positive review to NBAF, and I very much hope such a review will be warranted, the facility has 2 years of previously appropriated funds that remain unobligated. Science and Technology has told us that these funds will permit construction to begin and fund all necessary activities through fiscal year 2013. So the $75 million included in the bill before us is not needed at this time and will not be needed in the new fiscal year. This $75 million set aside in the bill for NBAF has some serious consequences for the science and technology function. It will eliminate most, if not all, funding for new research projects at the department and that they plan to begin in 2013. These projects focus on critical homeland security capabilities and would do the following: improve maritime transit security, improve explosives detection capability for mass transit, bulk cargo, and suicide bombers, provide building security and checkpoint security with a standoff ability to detect trace explosives on people and personal items, would improve TSA's capability to identify threats to aviation security, would integrate passenger screening at airport to improve security and the traveler's overall screening experience, would increase government security when using cloud-based computing systems, would improve federal, state, and local animal health officials' emergency response to control the spread of foreign animal diseases and mitigate any impact on the livestock industry, develop countermeasures against high-priority diseases that threaten U.S. livestock, provide building and facility operators a rapid warning and response capability to protect occupants in the event of a chemical or biological attack, and would improve the national, state, and local ability to respond to and recover from the effects of a nuclear radiological attack. Mr. Chairman, that is an impressive list of research priorities we should take very, very seriously. Any budget proposal that would displace or move aside these research priorities. So under this amendment, this $75 million will be returned to this critical research and development function, restoring these efforts, taking them back to the requested level. These funds will permit S&T to resume research and development work on 22 projects not funded in fiscal 2012, and would increase funding for 34 projects in important homeland security missions such as border security, biosecurity, chemical security, explosives detection, hostile behavior detection, and disaster resiliency. There's a lot at stake in this amendment. My colleagues, I urge you to adopt it. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose the gentleman from Kansas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a farmer and rancher myself, I am very concerned by this amendment. One might be led to believe that with the adoption of this amendment, somehow important research would continue. Actually, the opposite is true, Mr. Chairman. We have billions and billions of dollars in this country that are based on our livestock industries, and unless this Congress and this President continue forward with a plan to build a BASL Level 4 security research facility, we will not do the necessary research to protect critical industries, livestock industries in particular, in this nation. let me identify two diseases, the Hendra virus and the Nipah virus, that research is not occurring right now. The Hendra virus, first outbreak was in Australia in 1994. It killed 13 horses. But more importantly, it killed a number of humans. It's a zoonotic disease. And the research is not occurring now. Secondly, how about the Nipah virus? First identified in Malaysia in 1999. The outbreak resulted in the culling of more than 1 million hogs and 257 cases in humans, killing 105 of them. Without this type of research, Mr. Chairman, these are the kind of viruses we have no protection for. Folks might say, well, don't worry. If we would have this type of virus in America, we can outsource the research to our two friendly countries, Australia and Canada, that will do the research for us. But, Mr. Chairman, I'm not willing to rely on outsourcing the protection of very important industries. And these are just accidental outbreaks. There are numerous other viruses, numerous other diseases that are in the hands, I believe, and our research will show, in the hands potentially of enemies of our country. We need to oppose this amendment and protect our key vital food and agriculture industries from accidental as well as potential bioterrorist attacks. And so I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment and defend our critical industries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Who yields? Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. Those in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Yes, gentleman from New York.
On that, I request the yeas and nays.
Questions on the nays pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18 for the proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York will be postponed. Read.
Page 55, line 13, domestic.
Gentleman from Alabama.
I ask unanimous consent that the remainder of the bill through page 99, line 11, be considered as read, printed in the record, and open to amendment at any point.
Is there objection? Seeing none, so ordered. Are there any amendments to that portion of the bill? If not, the clerk will read.
Spending Reduction Account, Section 569, the amount by which the applicable allocation of new budget authority made by the Committee on Appropriations under Section 302B of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974 exceeds the amount of proposed new budget authority is $0.
Clerk will suspend.
You ready, Chris?
Ready. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments upon which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. An amendment offered by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin, an amendment offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia, an amendment offered by Mr. Holt of New Jersey, First Amendment by Mr. Clark of Michigan, Second Amendment by Mr. Clark of Michigan, First Amendment by Ms. Hahn of California, Second Amendment by Ms. Hahn of California, an amendment by Mr. Poe of Texas, an amendment by Mr. Bishop of Utah, an amendment by Ms. Loretta Sanchez of California, an amendment by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas, an amendment by Mr. Higgins of New York, an amendment by Mr. Bishop of New York. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes any time for an electronic vote on after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on an amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and remain standing. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House is voting on amendments to the bill that will fund the Homeland Security Department. More than $40.5 billion for immigration, the Coast Guard, Transportation Security Administration, and FEMA, among other agency spending. We spoke with a reporter for more details.
With the House debating the 2013 spending bill for Homeland Security, we're joined by Tim Starks of Congressional Quarterly up on Capitol Hill. Tim Starks, what are some of the key issues that lawmakers will debate?
Well, there's substantial agreement on a fair amount of the actual funding levels in the bill. In the past, there's been a fight where Republicans are trying to cut funding for state and local grants, and Democrats want to increase them. The Democrats still want more than is in there now, but they're a lot closer than they have been in past years. So that leaves a couple issues that are points of disagreement. One, there's a Republican amendment that was added to the bill in committee that restricted funding for the Bureau of Immigration and Customs Enforcement to spend any money on any abortion services. The Democrats would like to see that language removed. It's unclear whether there will actually be a removal of that language, though, because Democrats got some things modifying that language that they liked during the committee discussion. So there may not be enough energy or momentum to try and take that language out. There are other things that you actually might see Republicans, for instance, pushing for more border security funding. The bill does decrease slightly that Immigration and Customs Enforcement Bureau, so you might see some border state lawmakers try to increase that those funding levels. And then Democrats are also upset about some requirements in the bill that say they have to have a certain number of detention beds at ICE. They would like to see that language removed because they say that it doesn't really fit the need of what's out there.
You mentioned the issue of abortion. What other policy writer issues might we see in the debate?
Well, this bill has often been a vehicle for some of the language about Guantanamo. So that's one thing that you might see. You know, the language is often saying that you cannot transfer anyone to U.S. soil with any of the funds in this bill. That's in there again this year, like it has been in past years. But I don't know if there will be an effort to strip it. Democrats traditionally not liked it, but sometimes have not had the votes to get it.
Looking more broadly at the bill, compare it to the spending level from last year, and what agencies and programs does it specifically cover?
It is a very, very small decrease, at least in terms of how many other departments are facing big decreases. I think it's something like 1.2% decrease from last year. The departments, the components of the department that suffer the most are some of the management type accounts, and in particular the Transportation and Security Administration. The administration had wanted Congress to increase the security fee that airline passengers pay because expenses have gone up enormously, and that fee has not been increased for something like a decade. So the administration wanted that. The Republicans said, no way, we're not going to do it. In fact, we don't even like you proposing it, and we're going to reduce TSA funding as a result of that. Then some other agencies that are affected. Coast Guard is a big component of this Department of Homeland Security, and the administration had proposed some cutbacks that were very unpopular with members of Congress. This bill scales back those cutbacks. It does still cut the funding a little bit. It's still about $10 billion. So that gives you a sense of how big the Coast Guard is within the Department of Homeland Security budget, because we're talking about approximately a $40 billion bill just in terms of discretionary funding that lawmakers can move around, and then another $5.5 billion in disaster relief that doesn't count against those spending caps. So you know, there's an awful lot covered by the Department of Homeland Security overall spending bill, but there are a couple big components that are affected in particular.
Where's the Senate with their version of the Homeland Security bill?
That's also somewhat more similar than they have been in the past. This bill in the House is about $39.1 billion. The one in the Senate is $39.5 billion. So that's not as big a difference as they've had in some past years. And some of the issues that have been big points of dispute between the House and Senate, House being Republican-controlled, Senate being Democratic-controlled, have been some of those first responder, local, state and local grants. But because the Republicans this year said, okay, we've cut these funds enough in past years, we're not going to institute those kind of cuts this year, the Democrats in the Senate are much closer to the Republicans in the House right now than they have been.
Covering the Homeland Security debate in the House, Tim Starks of Congressional Quarterly. Read more at CQ.com. Thanks for the update.
Thank you.
We expect at least 12 amendment votes in this series and for work on amendments to the Homeland Security spending bill to continue into tomorrow. The House Ethics Committee announced today that Representative Maxine Waters' rights were not violated in its investigation of her, and this case will move forward. The Hill writes that Ms. Waters is next in line to fill Congressman Barney Frank's position as the top Democrat on the House Financial Services Committee next year when he retires. An ethics conviction could jeopardize her ascension to the post. For more than 2 years, the committee has investigated whether Waters violated House rules after allegations surfaced that she secured funding for a bank in which her husband owned stock. The California Democrat has said she's innocent. Meanwhile, House Speaker John Boehner and other Republican leaders today pushed for at least a one-year extension of all current tax rates. Speaker Boehner said extending the Bush-era tax rates, which are set to expire at the end of this year, would, quote, instill confidence to America's job creators. Here's that 10-minute briefing.
That's what I told him just a few minutes ago.
Just calm down, relax. Morning, everyone. You know, last week's jobs report was certainly bad news for the American people. And once again shows that the President's economic policies have failed. As a result, it's really important that we provide some certainty to job creators in our country. And extending all of the current tax rates for at least a year is really important if we're going to help job creators gain a little more confidence and put Americans back to work. Even Bill Clinton came out for it before he was against it. And then, you know, Larry Summers, the President's former economic advisor, this morning came out in favor of this. We believe it's time to extend all of the current tax rates because it really will provide certainty for American job creators. Senator McConnell.
Thank you, John. Let me just add, I was in the middle of the negotiation in December of 10 with the Vice President over extending the current tax rates for 2 years. The argument the President made in agreeing to do that 2 years ago was that the economy needed it. The growth rate now is actually slower than it was in December of 10. As the Speaker indicated, coupling that with Bill Clinton's remarks and then Larry Summers' remarks, it's pretty obvious that the economy needs the certainty of the extension of the current tax rates for at least a year. That would also give us the time to begin to grapple with something we all agree we need to do on a bipartisan basis, which is to reform the whole tax code. That hadn't been done in a quarter of a century, and I think Republicans and Democrats agree that we need to do that once again.
Good morning. You know, as the leader and speaker just said, I think even folks on the other side of the aisle and part of the President's team, if you will, are now actually coming to the realization we got to do everything we can to start growing this economy. It is about economic growth and job creation. That's what the small businesses are telling us. That is what working families are telling us. It's time to focus on job creation. The biggest impediment to that is the small businesses of America feeling that it's very difficult right now to predict where they should move, how they should allocate their capital because of the unknown in the tax rates. And that's why all of us are saying, let's say it to the American people once and for all. We're not going to allow tax rates to go up on anybody. We're going to go and pursue tax reform, as the leader just said, because all sides agree we've got to do something to make our code simpler and fairer.
One of the bills on the floor this week is the repeal of the medical device tax. And this was one of 18 new taxes that was included in the health care bill. I'm really excited that this legislation is coming forward because when you look at the medical device industry, it has been one of the most dynamic industries in America. It's really an American success story that over the last 40 and 50 years, these medical device companies have been coming up with life-saving equipment, great technologies. A few months ago, I held a forum with CEOs from the medical device industry. We called it Jobs and Innovation. And one CEO summed it up this way. He said, if you wanted to kill an industry, you're doing everything right. You know, that is the wrong message that we should be sending to our job creators. We want this kind of innovation in America. We want these kind of jobs. This is a dynamic industry. The tax would be devastating on it, and we're going to be moving forward this week with repealing this medical device tax and keeping these jobs in America. Another takeaway from the roundtable was that it takes 4 years longer, on average, to get anything approved in America versus what is required in Europe. Again, the regulations and the tax burden are making it harder on our job creators. Let's change that and head in a direction that will keep America competitive.
It's not often in Washington that you get a bipartisan view. But if you listen to former President Clinton, you listen to Summers, you listen to our Speaker, and you listen to our leader, which I would like to say happy birthday to Mr. Cantor. But they're saying the same thing as the small businesses are across America. Being a former small business owner, you know the number one thing you look at is certainty. The certainty of the idea of a tax code system of what you're going to do for next year. The other bipartisan view we have across America is our job growth stinks. We need to create jobs. Do you realize there's more cash on hand in America than there has been in the last 50 years? But the number one reason you cannot make that investment is the uncertainty. The uncertainty to the tax code and the uncertainty to the health care law. Well, you know what? Both of those could be changed this month. That's why we're asking for the extension so jobs can be created in America and America can get back to work.
Well, on Friday, the American people received even more bad news with the unemployment report. The real news is that 3.5 years into his administration, the President's policies, regrettably, are still failing the American people. It's all about the threat of serial trillion-dollar deficits. It's about the fact that this administration has put more regulations on the book than in any time in America's history. Part of it is the rhetoric that vilifies success, attacks the free enterprise system, and part of it is the threat of the single largest tax increase in America's history, much of which will fall upon small business. Now, obviously, President Bill Clinton gets it. He knows in this economy you should not be raising taxes on anybody. And so it will be a good week that House Republicans move to repeal at least one portion of the President's tax increase, the medical device tax, which doesn't just impact big businesses. I have a small tool and die manufacturer in Jacksonville, Texas, employs 35 people. I went to visit his little plant, and he told me, if this law is enacted, I'm probably going to lay off half of my workers. That's a lot of people in Jacksonville, Texas. It's time to get this economy moving again. It's time to take away the specter of the single largest tax increase in America's history.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to ask you what the Walker win means for Republicans this fall.
Well, I think Wisconsin's election shows that when you listen to the people of your jurisdiction, or in the case of Governor Walker, when you listen to the people of Wisconsin and you follow their will, they're going to stand behind you. They've taken some bold action in Wisconsin, and the Wisconsinites clearly support it.
Do you think that is, I mean, I know the legislative agenda here, what you've done in terms of cutting, but I mean, you know what he's done. Do you think that that is the type of thing that you guys should be pursuing here? And is there more of a mandate to do this now before the election?
The American people have had it with big government and high taxes and a regulatory system that knows no bounds. And they want elected officials to take control of the situation so that American job creators could go back to doing what they do best, creating jobs. Thanks.
That was from Capitol Hill today. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke will be on Capitol Hill tomorrow morning to talk about the economic outlook at a hearing of the Joint Economic Committee. We'll have that live at 10 a.m. Eastern on C-SPAN 3. We spoke with Congressman Mick Mulvaney about possible action by the Fed to stimulate the economy. We're going to watch that during this vote. The first question, though, is about the Wisconsin recall election.
Representative Mick Mulvaney, Republican of South Carolina, freshman representing the 5th District. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Let's get your impressions first about Governor Walker's win in Wisconsin. Headline of the Washington Times, Walker prevails, GOP governor holds on to seat in recall. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's hard to look at it any other way but than a huge victory for not only Governor Walker, but for Republicans in Wisconsin, Republicans statewide. I think the margin last night surprised some folks. In fact, I think he won by 6 or 7 points. I think that's a surprising number. I understand now that the narrative is sort of changing. The Democrats, I was watching some of the television coverage this morning, they're saying, well, the real story here was the amount of money in the race. I don't think that's the case. I think this was a fairly cut-and-dry, issues-driven race. Did you want to take on the public sector unions or not? And to have him come out by that margin, I think, is very, very telling. And as much as the Democrats are trying to downplay the result last night, trying to play up some of the exit polls that show that President Obama is still very popular there, I think the fact that Governor Walker becomes the first governor ever to survive a recall, does it by a substantial margin, certainly sends some warning bells over to the Democrats and to President Obama's campaign.
Moving on to the Federal Reserve, the Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke testifies before Congress tomorrow. What do you plan to ask him?
What's next? Which is usually what we always ask him. Clearly there's going to be a lot of pressure to do something. It seems that there's always pressure in this town to do something, especially when things aren't going as well as everybody likes. But we've asked him in the past what tools he has available to him, and he'll go down the list of things he can do: quantitative easing, asset purchase, Operation Twist. And then we'll press him again on whether or not he's concerned about inflation. So we do this little dance every single quarter, I think, on the Joint Economic and on the Budget Committees. I don't expect to hear anything new, but again, sometimes he will surprise you. I think he'll be under a lot of pressure from more members of his board now to talk about a new round of quantitative easing, given the fact that we saw these very disappointing job numbers last week, given the fact of what's happening in Europe. So I think the pressure from that wing of his board is going to intensify.
We had Mark Zandi from Moody's Analytics, chief economist there, on our program yesterday morning. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about the Federal Reserve Chairman's options.
I think the other, in that he's going to basically intimate, I think, that he's willing to use more monetary easing if he can, if conditions warrant, and if the rest of the committee goes along, and I think they will. The other thing he'll probably reiterate, he's already made this point, but I'll probably make it again, is that fiscal policymakers, that's Congress and the administration, really do need to start thinking about that fiscal cliff and what to do about it, because, again, if they do nothing and we go over the cliff, the economy is going to be in big trouble, and it's going to be very difficult for the Federal Reserve to get us out of that trouble. So I think he's going to make a really strong point to folks in Congress he's testifying to, that they need to act. And I'm sure he understands they can't act before the election, but they need to be thinking about this so that after the election they can act quite aggressively and quite quickly.
Mark Zandi from Moody's Analytics speaking on Washington Journal yesterday. Congressman Mulvaney, the fiscal cliff that he's talking about includes a lot of changes to the tax policy, a bunch of other things that will be happening at the end of the year, sequestration and the like. What's Congress's responsibility to stabilize things right now?
Much more than the Fed's responsibility to stabilize things. In fact, we've had some very candid discussions with Dr. Bernanke. He's actually from my part of South Carolina. He grew up in Dillon, which is an area that I represent. So we've had some really good conversations, both privately and publicly. And every time I press him on my concerns about inflation, about what the possible negative implications of what the Fed is doing, he'll turn around and say in so many words, the real problem, Mr. Mulvaney, is y'all. Congress is the real problem. The deficits that you're running up, this fiscal mess that you're in, the policies that you're putting into place is really what's the real long-term risk. Because in his mind, and he's absolutely correct, he can turn off the spigot. He can take punch out of the punch bowl, to use his phrase, because he can stop. He could raise interest rates. He could tighten monetary policy. He can react very, very quickly. It's Congress that hasn't shown any ability to have any discipline when it comes to spending. We'll spend money during the good times and run up deficits and debts, and we'll spend money during the bad times and run up deficits and debts. So I think to that point, Mr. Zandi's absolutely right. We're approaching the limit of what the Fed can do to help save the country from Congress. And I think when we look forward as what's going to happen between now and the end of the year, you've got tax increases to deal with, you've got the debt ceiling to deal with, we probably have a health care decision coming out of the Supreme Court the next couple of weeks to deal with. There's some big fiscal issues to deal with between now and the end of the year. To think that the Fed is going to save us from all of our bad decision making, I think, is short-sighted.
Representative Mulvaney sits on the Budget Committee, also Small Business, Joint Economic Committee. He's a member of the Tea Party caucus, serving his freshman term. Paula, Republican in Hudson, Wisconsin. Good morning.
Good morning. I just want to make my comment that we never wanted to be tall here in Wisconsin, but it had to start somewhere to change this country around. We want balanced budgets. We never wanted to be pitted against neighbors, and now we really need to pay attention. And Ryan has been screaming to the top of the roof that he wants to help. We need to listen to Paul Ryan, and Congress really needs to work with him. Thank you so much.
Paula, did you go out and vote yesterday?
Of course, yes.
And did you feel like a lot of your neighbors, friends, family were also voting? We saw a high turnout.
Yes, it was a high turnout because the Tea Party in 2010 set the motion. They want just principles that are simple, balanced budgets.
Okay, let's get a response from the congressman.
Paula, first off, and I know it's off topic, Paula, my family's originally from Hudson, Wisconsin, believe it or not. I'm not wearing my great-grandfather's watch today, but he worked for the Hudson Manufacturing Company for decades, and it's nice to hear somebody from all the way back, several generations back from where my family came from. You're absolutely right, and what you heard, I think, Libby, is exactly the sentiment that drove this election result yesterday, which is, look, someone has to deal with it. Someone has to stand up and be first. And if they did it last night in Wisconsin and delivered a common sense message, then so be it. And the message is exactly as plain spoken and common sense as Paula just said, which is that you have to balance the budget. You can't continue to spend all this money that you don't have. I know you hear us say that again and again in Washington. It becomes trite after a while, but it's the value of the statement is not diminished. You cannot spend money that you don't have indefinitely, and that's one of the things we'll be talking to Mr. Bernanke about, to Dr. Bernanke tomorrow, as he goes into this quantitative easing. Part of that involves printing money. Now he'll say it's not printing because I actually just conjure it up on a computer screen, so technically it's not printing, but it is creating money that we don't have so that we can continue to spend at these heightened levels. And I'm hoping that if any message comes out of Wisconsin, and what the folks like Paula did yesterday, it's that we need to step back and look at this from a fairly rational standpoint and say, look, can you do this forever? Everybody outside of Washington knows that you can't. Sooner or later, that message might actually make it inside the Beltway. Maybe yesterday in Wisconsin was the first step of that.
Let's hear from Carl, Democratic caller in Chicago. Welcome.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I really get tired of you people talking about, well, oh, we spending money, we spending money. This economic crisis that we went in, you ask yourself, well, oh, you're not aware of the fact that, well, we probably lost more than 2 years of GDP. That meant that, well, hey, for at least 2 years, we didn't create any money.
Mr. Lewis of Georgia votes aye. Mr. Welch. Mr. Welch votes aye. Mr. Yarmouth. Mr. Yarmouth votes aye. Mr. Blumenauer. Mr. Blumenauer votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 154, the nays are 260. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote and the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed. By voice vote, the clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia.
A recorded vote has been requested. All those in support of request for recorded vote will rise and remain standing. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Amendment voting continues here in the House on the Homeland Security spending bill. Some of our live coverage tomorrow, Attorney General Eric Holder will testify before the House Judiciary Committee about operations at the Justice Department. That'll be live online at 9:30 a.m. Eastern at cspan.org. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke will be talking about the economic outlook at a hearing of the Joint Economic Committee. We heard about that in our last vote. Live tomorrow morning at 10 Eastern on C-SPAN 3. Also, President Obama will give a speech on the economy at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. We'll also have live coverage of that on C-SPAN 3 at 4:05 p.m. Eastern Time.
The ayes are 140, the nays are 273. The addendum is not agreed to. Question is, the unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Holt of New Jersey.
The recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise and remain standing. Sufficient number having arisen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment would reduce funds for executive management at the Homeland Security Department, security analysis, and the Transportation Security Administration, and transfer the money to state and local grants for transit security at the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Senate leaders today were working to reach agreement to proceed on the Farm Bill, which includes subsidies, conservation, and nutrition programs, including food stamps. A vote on whether to move forward on debate is expected tomorrow. The current Farm Act expires at the end of September, and the Associated Press writes that getting a new plan in place by then will likely require tough negotiations between the Senate and the House, which is taking a different approach to farm protection programs and seeking deeper cuts than the $23 billion over 10 years envisioned in the Senate. Meanwhile, the House version is one step closer to the House floor. It was approved by an appropriations panel today.
The yeas are 173. The nays are 240. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Clark, upon which further proceedings were postponed and upon which the noes prevailed by voice vote. Clerk will redesignate the amendment.
First amendment offered by Mr. Clark of Michigan.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for recorded vote will rise and remain standing. Sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is requested. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This is the first of 2 amendments that the House will vote on, offered by Representative Clark of Michigan. House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi sent a letter today to House Speaker John Boehner asking him to suspend next week's House recess. In part, Leader Pelosi wrote to Mr. Boehner, quote, "I call on you to cancel next week's recess, our 9th week-long recess of the year, and instead commit the House to working round the clock to address the highway and student loan laws and to extend the middle-class income tax cut without further delay." Those programs are set to expire, but Politico writes that a spokesman for Mr. Boehner pointed his finger back at the Democrats, saying, quote, "Representative Pelosi's letter should be addressed to her Democratic colleagues running the Senate, who are still blockading a host of jobs bills passed by the House with bipartisan support. We are happy to forward her note to them."
The yeas are 211, the nays are 202. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the 2nd amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Clark, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
2nd amendment offered by Mr. Clark of Michigan.
Recorded vote has been requested. All those in favor of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Another amendment offered by Representative Clark of Michigan. Another letter was sent today, this one from House Speaker John Boehner and House Majority Leader Eric Cantor to President Obama, encouraging to work in a bipartisan manner to prevent student loan rates from doubling.